Slain, thou shalt gain heaven. Victorious, thou shalt inherit the earth. So rise, son of Kunti, resolved for battle. There are very few armored regiments that have stood on the cusp of modern history on 3 occasions and delivered every time. First, in 1962, when the Chinese attacked, our tanks were flown into Leh and then moved to Chushul, when along with 13 Kumaon at Razangla, we defended the Chushul airfield. In a fierce battle at 14,000 feet, Chiki was awarded the VRC and Prem Singh the Sena Medal. Next, in Cham, in 1965, when along with 2nd Grenadiers, we defended the Akhnur Bridge at Batla. This war saw some of the fiercest tank versus tank action, where Bhaskar won his MVC and 8 others were also awarded for their valor. And thirdly, in 1971 at Laungewala, where we held firm along with 13th Kumaon and 6-5 Gurkhas and re-established the sanctity of the international border and pushed the battered enemy back into Pakistan. Naib Rasaldar Rishpal Singh and Dafadar Harbir Singh were decorated in battle. In his article, Taking on the Enemy at Laungewala, the British historian James Hatter compares this critical battle to the Battle of Thermopylae in 479 BC. He describes it as the deciding moment of the 1971 war against Pakistan. The battle was considered so important that Field Marshal R.M. Carver, the chief of the Imperial General Staff in UK, visited Laungewala immediately after the war to get the first-hand knowledge of the conduct of battle. 20th Lancers was a light regiment earmarked for defensive battle and in 1967 moved from Akhnur in J&K to the Desert 6 sector of 12 Infantry Division. We had the responsibility for the defense of Jaisalmer. Jaisalmer Fort is the largest preserved fortified cities in the world, and up to the 17th century, when India's share of the world trade was 20%, it was very strategically located on the old Silk Route. It serviced the port city of Karachi. However, with the growth of Bombay, it lost its importance. The desert orientation started in 1967 with Om Suri and his battle-hardened team from Cham. This was the original team. However, we were unfortunate to lose Major Amarjit Singh in the Battle of Cham in 1971. Lieutenant Colonel Baba Gurvachan Singh, a large-hearted veteran from Cham, was the commandant. Chiki was the 2IC. Amarjit Clare, the adjutant. I was the TA. And Prabhuji, an excellent horseman who had ridden in the torchlight tattoo at Edinburgh Castle in Scotland, was our quartermaster. A Squadron was commanded by Kuti Nair. KD was his 2IC and Rasaldar Rajbir Singh his senior JCO. B Squadron was commanded by Suraj. Bhaskar Rao was the 2IC and Rasaldar Sampuran Singh as the senior JCO. C Squadron had Tejveer in command with Ghanti Baswan as the 2IC and Rasaldar Daryao Singh as the senior JCO. Ravi commanded Headquarters Squadron with Billu as the RHQ troop leader, Brother Bajwa as the Recce troop leader, Sharma, who looked like a boxer masquerading as the doctor, Rasaldar Kalwant Singh, who was also the officiating Rasaldar Major. Krishnaswamy was the OC LRW and had the onerous responsibility of briefing us every morning on the BBC World News, our only window to the outside world. Kunar was OCFRI. In 1967, the concept of desert formations was non-existent. In 12 Infantry Division, we had two excellent GOCs in Eric Vaz and JFR Jacob. They trained us and were instrumental in the issue and release of a variety of specialist stores without which we could have never been made battle-worthy. This apart, from 1968 onwards, we annually spent at least 3 months at Pokhran for field firing and training. Sand tires were issued for 25% of our jeeps and 3 tons for fighting arms. Critical unit communication equipment was issued and recce troop vehicles were modified for specialist roles. Units were issued with PSP sheets which were latched on the body of the 3-ton and used for self-recovery. Additional command engineer units were grouped with the divisions, and World War I duck boards were redesigned in bulk for use in the sand. Duck boards were used primarily for trail blazing on difficult stretches, for helipads as crossing lanes and parking areas. In October 71, when mines were issued, our tank troops from 80 Armour Delivery Regiment and a brand new Vijanta ARV had come in, we knew that the balloon was finally going up. We were prepared and rehearsed even to move to a different theatre of operations. Operational plans. Pakistan 18 Infantry Division located at Rahim Yar Khan was commanded by Major General Mustafa and had an offensive role. The airfield at Jacobabad was to be activated to provide air cover. Since the army had decided on 2nd December to launch this thrust on 4th-5th December, the PAF liaison officer attending the Div commander's orders had announced that since the PAF had not been given time to activate the airstrip at Jacobabad, it would not be able to provide any air cover. When General Gul Hassan, Chief of General Staff Pakistan Army, was approached, he ruled, since very little air action was expected from the IAF, the planned operation in national interest would go through without PAF cover. The concentration area was in Reti, and the offensive was to kick off from Gabbar and planned in 3 phases. 51 Infantry Brigade Minus and 22 Cavalry T-59s was to isolate Laungewala and capture Ramgarh by D+2. The brigade was commanded by Brigadier Tariq Mir and had only 2 battalions, as a 3rd battalion of the brigade was in a ground holding role. Phase 2, 206 Infantry Brigade and 38 Cavalry Sherman Force was to follow up and capture Laungewala. The brigade was commanded by Brigadier Z.A. Khan and again had only 2 battalions. The 3rd was covering the ingress routes to Rahim Yar Khan. Phase 3, 38 Cavalry with 38 Baluch ex-206 Infantry Brigade was to go in for the neutralization of Jaisalmer. The attack had limited artillery support and had a major problem in troop movement, as they were being moved in 4x2 civilian hired transports and tractors with trolleys, and logistics support was well below par. Enemy information was sketchy. 206 Infantry Brigade and a squadron of armour had been reported at Rahim Yar Khan, with a company up at Bhagla. The border was held by 3 Mujahid companies with its wing headquarters at Rahim Yar Khan. The Indian offensive. 45 Brigade with Brigadier Kharbanda was to hold the firm base from Laungewala to Kishangarh, a frontage of approximately 100 kilometers. General Khambata placed the Div headquarters, main, at Tanot and the rear at Ranao. 30 Brigade under Brigadier Ramdas was the assaulting brigade and was placed at Mokul, while the follow-up brigade 322, which was commanded by Brigadier Dugal, was placed at Sanu. Deployment of armour. 20th Lancers was at Ghantiali and 6th Independent Armoured Squadron commanded by Major R.D. Law was placed at Ghotaru. The Shagar sector was with the BSF. The offensive plan. In Phase 1, 30 Brigade and 20th Lancers were to capture Bhagla by padlock plus 32 hours. In Phase 2, 322 Brigade was to secure Tarenda and the Munera distributory by padlock plus 60. And in Phase 3, we were expected to intercept the National Highway 5 by padlock plus 84. The ops commenced on night 4th-5th December. It was a moonlit night, ideal for offensive operations in the desert. For us, we launched initially without Amarjeet the adjutant and Tejveer OCC squadron, as they both were on a short casual leave. But being enthusiastic cavalrymen, both ensured they were in battle location by 5th December afternoon. The operation commenced like clockwork. All eyes were on Rahim Yar Khan. Under crossing control at the note, the serials rolled past. A vehicles of 20th Lancers moved cross-country, north of the road, while 6 IS joined them from Ghotaru. 30 Brigade moved in their serials in TCVs along the main road to Kishangarh. All eyes were glued to the preliminary operations. The raids of 23 Punjab on Sandh and 8 Togras on Jadewala Toba. And the 20th Lancers Troop and 3 Jat companies capture of Sakere Wali Khu and Islamgarh. Bikramjit drew first blood for us. At last light, 8 tanks of C Squadron rolled across the IB at BP 577 instead of the tank troop originally planned. During the recce of the objective on the previous night, fresh intelligence inputs said there could be 25-pounder guns in the direct firing role. The tank strength was raised to 8 tanks with Naib Sardar Pep Singh's troop coming in, as its capture was considered imperative as it linked our subsequent access of maintenance from the Dugport track at BP 577 on to Bhagla. At 2000 hours, the RT lit up the target with illuminating rounds, and the tanks assaulted at the short halt with the infantry following in the wake. The troops came under heavy machine gun fire from the MMG section, but there were no RCLs or 84 MMRLs that opened up. The objective was mopped up by the infantry, and by 2045 the tanks were withdrawn. The attacks on Islamgarh and the 2 company raids were still in progress. At 2300 hours, Lieutenant Dharamveer's patrol at BP 635, almost 100 kilometers away, reported tank sounds, but was told that it was probably an odd engineer vehicle stuck in the sand. However, the division was informed. Although the TACAR sortie at last light had reported no enemy movement on the Rahim Yar Khan Bhagla Islamgarh axis, no TACAR sortie had been flown on the Reti Gabbar Laungewala side. At 0230 hours, Dharamveer could see a large tank column and the div was informed. 2 actions were taken immediately. CO 23 Punjab, Lieutenant Colonel Hussain, rushed 2 RCLs from Sadewala to the Laungewala post. Some anti-tank mines were laid at the post and some scattered randomly on hearing the tanks approaching. at 0300 hours, the enemy RT commenced registration, and by 0330, the post was under effective RT fire. Major Chandpuri confirmed tanks had surrounded his post. He was told air support could only be available at 0700 hours, and he had to hold out. Dafadar Ranbir Singh's troop of 20th Lancers at Sadewala was warned to be prepared to move. By 0430 hours, the enemy tanks had completely surrounded the post, and the first infantry attack was launched, and the battle cry of Ya Ali heard. The post was pounded with medium artillery and mortars, and the assaulting infantry was shot in by the tank guns of approximately 20 tanks. The camel fodder shed of the BSF was set ablaze, and the flames leapt into the sky. But the post kept their cool and knocked out 2 tanks with their RCLs. The tanks stayed at 500 yards and did not assault, as they saw a single strand of barbed wire around the post, which was actually kept to keep the camels from straying. They had also seen some empty mine boxes, which probably dissuaded them. At 0400 hours, General Khambata put the divisional offensive on hold. I was summoned by Colonel Bawa and told to proceed post-haste to Kishangarh and tell Major Nair to hold fast till further orders. In those days, LOs were sent to convey critical orders, and the Commandant added, "I don't want Kuti and Kuldeep galloping off to Pakistan when we have a war on our hands here." I reached Kishangarh at 0700 hours after a journey strung out with bypasses around defective vehicles and a harassed recovery organization. An ideal target for enemy air. I conveyed the orders to an ever-smiling Kuti and a very disappointed KD. Just before first light, as the enemy tanks were redeploying for daytime, a T-59 tank and ARV came straight down the road through the smouldering post and redeploying enemy and went racing down towards the road to Tanot. It could not be engaged by the 20th Lancers troops now in position in the dark, but we managed to stop him. It turned out to be a 6 IAS tank which had become defective en route from Ghotaru. The tank commander had waited his turn while the Pakistani tanks were redeploying, and at first light he found his bearing and raced down to join his squadron, which was getting ready for the offensive in Kishangarh. For an exemplary quality of courage Major Chandpuri displayed that night, and the exceptional leadership qualities he showed in the execution of a virtually impossible task against a force that outnumbered him vastly, Major Chandpuri was awarded the Mahavir Chakra. Night 4th-5th September, the Jaisalmer Air Base worked round the clock to rearm the Hunter aircraft for ground support role. And after an exhausting night, Wing Commander Bawa had clearly instructed his boys to engage the targets which were surrounding the post as first priority. Major Atma Singh had tied up communications, and he and Captain Sangha were airborne to guide the fighter aircraft onto the targets. Dafadar Harbir Singh was the troop Dafadar of the 20th Lancers AMX troop of 80 Armoured Delivery Regiment placed at Sadewala. He had just rejoined after an instructional tenure at Ahmednagar, and that night was placed suddenly under command of CO 17 Rajrif, the vanguard of 30 Brigade. 17 Rajrif, with Dafadar Harbir Singh's troop, was moving south to contact the enemy at Laungewala. Dafadar Harbir Singh's troop made contact with the enemy, and a few engagements had taken place. The point tank to his right engaged an enemy tank and scored a direct hit, but the round did not penetrate. Dafadar Harbir Singh moved forward aggressively and engaged the same tank. Both tanks fired simultaneously. The T-59 round penetrated the MX through the upper turret where the ammunition is stored, and the tank exploded into a fireball. According to Major Dharam Raj Singh, the tank lifted 4 feet in the air and then landed back. The driver bailed out and ran to Major Dharam Raj, asking him to get the commander, Daftar Harbir Singh, and the gunner Sube Singh. But the tank was already an inferno. For his astute leadership and conspicuous gallantry, Daftar Harbir Singh was awarded the Veer Chakra posthumously. Colonel Baba's voice came clearly over the radio. Close in to 800 meters for all tank engagements. The hunters then went in for their kill. Brigadier Tariq Mir communicated 3 things to GOC 18 Div. Firstly, Laungewala was held by determined regular troops. Secondly, enemy tanks had reached the area and would have to be brought to battle. And thirdly, enemy fighter aircraft had commenced their attacks on the Pakistani tanks. Although this was just a battle report, it conveyed some caution, as they had not expected to confront regular infantry, tanks, and enemy air in the opening engagement. The next 3 hours were manned by the Air Force. The hunters swept down and were directed by the aeroplane. 5 tanks were destroyed in the first strike and another 6 tanks in the second one. The first hunter mission was flown by Squadron Leader D.K. Das and Flight Lieutenant Gosai. By 0900 hours, General Khambata had issued fresh orders. 30 Brigade was tasked for the defense of Laungewala sector, and A Squadron 20th Lancers was pulled in as the divisional reserve. 6 IAS was tasked to go via Ramgarh on tracks and contact the enemy at the earliest. 322 Brigade with 20th Lancers Minus under command was tasked to advance on the road Ramgarh-Laungewala to contact the enemy earliest. Both B and C Squadron moved back on tracks, and the advance from Ramgarh commenced on the 6th at first light. With a pause in the battle for refueling around about 10:30, 22 Cav attacked again. The C Squadron commander, Major Talat Said, mounted an attack with 2 companies of 38 Baluch, and the FUP chosen was the Laungewala water point. 17 Rajrif Company, led by Major Dharam Raj, had secured the heights dominating the water point. Accurate MMG fire and artillery disrupted the attack. Brigadier Ramdas ordered Laungewala post to be reinforced, and this was done by 1100 hours. The air attacks continued mercilessly. The Pak B Squadron tanks were in the open bowl, and the Pakistani tank crews locked the throttle and one stick and bailed out of the moving tanks, so that the crewless tanks went unmanned in circls. This made target acquisition easier, and most tanks caught fire from the 37mm tracers, which set fire to the stowage. At 1100 hours, General Mustafa sent orders in writing to Brigadier Tariq Mir. Firstly, he was not to proceed beyond Laungewala. And secondly, 28th Baluch Recce and support was ordered to capture Ghotaru. The Hepta was spotted by Captain Dharamveer's returning patrol, as also Daftar Harbir's troop, but could not be engaged as they did not have any MMG ammunition. By 16:30 hours of 5th December, 22 Cav had suffered 17 tank casualties, 14 from the air and 3 by ground troops. Brigadier Tariq Mir abandoned the idea of firming in around Laungewala and ordered the withdrawal of 22nd Cavalry to the IB. Battles are won and lost in the minds of the commanders, and with this order, the Pakistani psyche changed, and Pakistan lost the Battle of Laungewala. But the real heroes of 6th December were Captain PPS Sangha and Major Atma Singh of the Aero P. Sangha was responsible for the guidance of the initial sorties and the destruction of the first 7 tanks. Major Atma Singh landed his crippled aircraft on the Laungewala helipad and directed the afternoon sorties from the same crippled aircraft. Both pilots were awarded the Veer Chakra. By 1730 hours, Major R.D. Law had arrived with 6 IS in Laungewala. The retreating Pak tanks could be heard in the distance, but otherwise there was an eerie silence with 18 simmering tank hulls in view. 6 IS was raised just 2 weeks ago in mid-November 1971 at Ahmednagar, with the tank crew's integration being done at the zeroing range. The squadron commander, Major R.D. Law, was reporting directly from the Defence Services Staff College to take command. The squadron had just driven 200 kilometers on tracks in a wartime scenario, picked up the Pakistani gauntlet, thumped it on the table, and claimed its bounty. The Indians had demonstrated their intention of keeping Laungewala post that night. The squadron harbored just south of the post. Peter Bhatia moved forward to Chand Singh Tekri with a troop of tanks and no infantry to ensure that they were not surprised from the north. Approximately 1500 yards away, Pak commander of 206 Brigade, with the non-availability of the tanks of 38 Cav, had requested a squadron from 22 Cav to be put to the attack and asked 51 Brigade to mark the FUP. This was not agreed to, and after last night, both brigades were moving in opposite directions. The attack on Laungewala was finally called off by the Pakistanis at 0300 hours. The brigade had started preparing the intermediate positions for the next day's battle. Till 1815, I had been involved in the recovering of tanks on the Kishangarh-Tanot axis. I therefore headed straight for Laungewala from Tanot, and on arrival at the Laungewala post, went to Major Chandpuri's bunker. Colonel Gariwal and me had dinner with him. However, except for the sudden and intermittent arty shelling, there was very little enemy information. The axis of advance. With the general direction of sand dunes running from northeast to southwest and the interdunal space of 500 to 700 yards in between dunes, whether advancing along the track to BP 635 or to BP 638, the configuration looked the same. With Masit Varyotar in the distance, this would normally be an integrated battle zone. With absolutely no interference from enemy air, the progression of battle became more predictable and resulted in a complete compartmentalization between the under the horizon zone and the over the horizon zone. The battle started below the horizon till the main ground positions were hit. From the air, the ground targets were camouflaged and could not easily be recognized. The moment the guns opened up to support the main positions or reserves, the action turned to the over the horizon zone, with the destruction and interdiction of targets by air. ROP and FACs directed the fire clinically and effectively. There was no air casualty from Pakistani ground fire. The advance to the IB started astride track to BP 635 and BP 638. 6 IAS had been pulled in as reserve at Laungewala. B Squadron advanced along on the track to BP 638, and C Squadron, with the RHQ troop under command, advanced on the BP 635 track. By 1200 hours, the regiment had contacted the 206 intermediate position at Maganwala Dhar. As 6 IAS had been pulled in as reserve, an opportunity presented itself. The commandant suggested to the GOC that the regiment continue its advance from the south, and A Squadron, 6 IAS and an infantry battalion outflank the 206 Infantry Brigade and cut off both 51 and 206 Brigade. This was not agreed to by the formation headquarters. The regiment minus was then placed under command 30 Brigade for advance and the pressure maintained. That night we harbored at kilometer stone 2 and 3 Jats gave infantry protection. 7th December. The advance continued along the tracks to BP 635 and 638 with 6 IAS now coming in west along the track to BP 638. The enemy fought bitterly for the ground he gave. The 206 Brigade elements were pushed back from Laungewala Dhar by 1500 hours and most of the attacks were frontal. Billu's leading tank of RHQ troop came under RCL fire. Naib Rasaldar Richpal Singh was moved forward despite intense enemy fire. His tank was hit and set ablaze and he was wounded. Thanti Baswan pulled him out of the tank and put him on the stretcher bearer jeep. Naib Rasaldar Richpal Singh was awarded the Sena Medal for his action. Brother Bajwa, the Recce troop leader, insisted on engaging an enemy tank from an AFV. Suraj Baswani told him there would be immediate RT fire, but he persisted. Sure as hell, the enemy retaliated, with all of us scampering for cover. Chiki drove across to check if all was well, and luckily, all was well. But it was Pradeep Khanna's lucky day. At 14:30 hours, 2 Pak F-104s attacked his troop and missed. A little later, a 122mm mortar shell landed a few yards from his tank and did not explode. And later, one of his troop tanks opened up on our own troops and also missed. How lucky can you get? 6 IAS also lost 2 tanks due to RCL fire. Lieutenant Bhadbade was killed by machine gun fire. BW, Sepoy Aurangzeb of 1 Punjab, was captured by us and handed over to Amarjit for interrogation. Amarjit was not supposed to ask him any questions as he was not a trained interrogator, but I don't think that worried Amarjit too much. The Pakistanis had booby-trapped vehicles which they left behind, and Lance Avtar Hari Singh, 303, had his foot blown off while recovering a Sherman AR. By last light, the last intermediate position of 51 Brigade had been contacted. The Pakistanis had had 3 clear days to prepare this position. 6 IAS and C Squadron broke through just before last night. We had once again beaten the Pakistani tankmen to the quick. It was the Pakistani logistic area and had the medium gun position also in it. It was littered with stores, ammunition, empties, radio sets and communication equipment. The FSC with Peter Bhatia of 6 IAS, Flying Officer Tyagi, engaged the 7 T-59 tanks retreating from that position. The unused L-60 anti-aircraft gun could still be seen lying in that position. 8th December. The advance continued along the 2 tracks till we hit the enemy at Masit Warotar. By 10th December, the orders for the de-induction of B Squadron 20th Lancers, 6 IAS and 322 Brigade to 11 Div in the Barmaid sector had been received. The squadron left Kharotar on the 12th December at 16:30 for Jaisalmer, from where the B vehicle convoy left for Munabao at 1300 hours. On 13th December, Suraj Baswani travelled with 322 Brigade R Group by road to Munabao. By 14th December, our tanks were unloaded at Khokrapar and deployed in Chachro and Nayachor, Pakistan. And finally, we are proud that on 5th December, when pitted against the most advanced tank in the world at that time and outnumbered 22 to 1, Dafadar Harbir Singh's troop of 20th Lancers had the guts to wade out into the enemy on the 5th morning and held out that entire day. When you dropped a message from the ROP of enemy tanks ahead, it takes courage to advance with obsolete equipment against a modern MBT deployed in a defensive position. On 6 December, at Maganwala Dhar, our quick outflanking maneuvers forced the enemy tanks to withdraw prematurely, forcing a disengagement by night. We recovered their ARV the next day. On 7th December, at the 51 Infantry Brigade position on the IB, which they had 48 hours to prepare for, again, we were able to beat them into submission with Flying Officer Tyagi, the FSC with 6 IAS, on Peter Bhatia's tank, directing the aircraft to engage the 7 Pakistani tanks which were waiting to combat us. It also takes guts to chase an enemy superior in strength, right up to your tactical reach, and only stop because half your force has been withdrawn to exploit success in a different sector. By the end, we had captured 644 square kilometers of Pak territory with vintage tanks and covered 200 kilometers on tracks. A lesser regiment would have consolidated at the breach at Laungewala and not attempted or dared to regain lost territory, leave alone push the Pakistanis back from where they started. The MXs were deposited with the ordnance a month later. And lastly, Laungewala was not a great tank versus tank battle, but it was the first unpredictable, quick and decisive victory in modern Indian warfare, in which we reacted, adapted and evolved in a very dangerous military situation. Nowhere across the board in all our modern military campaigns has such a grave adverse situation of this dimension being rectified so quickly or so profitably. It is for this reason that General Sam Manekshaw visited the unit at Jaipur after the war to convey his personal shabash. 20th Lancers played the pivotal role in the outcome of victory and regaining of territory in Laungewala. We had not been bogged down with the baggage of existing procedures applied to the other battles of 1971. We had sidestepped and thrust deep and fought the battle of tomorrow. To close, it would be appropriate to remember the 20th Lancers' first battle honor of the 20th century of France and Flanders in 1917 and link it to its last battle of the 20th century at Laungewala. We have carried the torch faithfully. Our fallen cavalryman in Flanders had said, "We are the dead. Short years ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, with failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If he break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields."